We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Yo guys! I'm Uruzi. Here is part 5 of What If Naruto Went Rogue. After failing to save Sasuke, Naruto escapes the village. Now alone, on the run, and wielding the sword of the Demon of the Mist, Naruto tries to rebuild his life as a ninja. This will be a Naruto Temari pairing. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 29, Zark stings and Kabuto sings. Naruto licked the palm of his hand and sucked each finger. Man, that honey really is good. See? Vincent said confidently, everyone makes fun of my honey eating, that is until they try it. I mean seriously, you people need to try this. No, Temari said bluntly, I'm quite sure we don't. Bah! Suit yourself. Oh, I almost forgot, Kisame Vincent said as Naruto dug into his clay pot in search of honey. Zark was here with his daughter recently, and though it's a big city, you should watch yourself. Kisame blinked, wait. Zark is here, as in, Zark of the Hidden Mist? As in, Zark, Sword Master of the Hidden Mist? Yeah. Like I said, you probably don't need to worry. He wanted a list of all the high-powered shinobi in the area, then he and his daughter left. Hold on a second, Kisame said nervously. Just being within 30 square miles of Zark would make me worry, so being in the same city as him is a big deal. Naruto spoke through a mouthful of honey, how come you care so much anyway? Allow me to be blunt, I learned swordsmanship from Hidoro Matsu, who learned swordsmanship from Ganju Sakai, and he learned swordsmanship from Ikana Zark. Are we now getting some idea of why I'm concerned? Itachi crossed his arms, but it's not like he's one of the 7 swordsmen or anything, so I think you're overreacting. Kisame shook his head. Zark was around before the 7 swordsmen, and his daughter, Ikana Seraphim, is one of the 7 swordsmen. Not only that, as if he weren't enough of a pain on his own, Zark uses a powerful ninjutsu sword and no one has any idea where he got it. Well, Temari said, now I'm worried. Naruto was silent as his thoughts churned. Temari. I think we saw him. What? That old guy, at the restaurant. No, I'm sure that was him. It would be far too much of a coincidence for there to be 2 old men in this city able to hide their chakra that well, and yet still have so much of it. Kisame started to pace, well this is just great. We are so screwed. I'm amazed we haven't been found out already, especially considering the first place they'd look for people like us would. Struck by momentary insight, his eyes riveted themselves to the office door, which slowly started to open. For if I were an Oscar Mayer Yioneer, everyone would be in love with me. Kabuto sat in tree, singing to himself. It wasn't like there was anyone close enough to hear him, and watching guards wander around can only amuse someone for so long. Vincent's secretary pushed her head into the office door. Excuse me sir, but Zark-sama is here to see you again. The young secretary balked at having so many piercing gazes focused on her, even as the poobah muttered to himself then spoke firmly, tell him I'm busy. If that doesn't work, have the building's power cut. The secretary rushed back out, sensing urgency. Yes sir. Kisame smacked his fist into the palm of his other hand. We have maybe 3 minutes, so everyone listen carefully. Seraphim will most definitely be waiting on the ground just outside the window, and we have no weapons. Itachi appeared unconcerned. And whose fault is that? This is not the time to be smug, Itachi. I have to think. And so, with a very determined, but still very polite, old man pushing his way past Karen the door lady downstairs, there was silence in the Puba's office as Kisame applied his often underestimated intelligence to getting them out of there. The proverbial light bulb appeared at last. Got it. Ikana Seraphim stood below the central tower impatiently, leaning her rather small sword against her shoulder. It is worth noting that the term rather small sword is used relatively, meaning that she used a katana rather than some type of broadsword and it was only 5 or so feet long. Her father had told her to just stand and watch the Puba's office window. That was it, stand and watch a window. She had trained her whole life, practiced until she fainted from chakra depletion, and finally achieved membership as the first woman in the 7 swordsmen. And her father told her to stand and watch a window. It wasn't even a very interesting window, just a big sheet of glass somehow adhered to the wall. That was, until it shattered. Shards of glass rained into the street as hundreds of clones poured out the window, running and leaping off in all directions. Her eyes scanned the mass, the surrounding buildings, making it impossible to use the mass-destructive type of jutsu typically used to clear such numbers of clones. She was just about to send her own clone army in pursuit, when she noticed a chakra fluctuation. Locking her senses onto that clone, she bounded after it. Among the clones, Naruto and Temari, who looked like Naruto thanks to a henge, ran quickly while not allowing themselves to move faster than the general mass of clones. Naruto glanced back. I think she took the bait, since she's coming after us. Can I just say now that I think this plan is completely insane? Sure, if it will make you feel better, but I suggest we run faster, since she's catching up. And was it really necessary to waste chakra on all those clones? Yes, because otherwise it would have been too obvious that we were drawing her away. They hit the city limits and started leaping through trees rather than buildings. But still, that may have been a bit excessive. Naruto silently conceded, but it was more because he wanted to focus on running than because he agreed with her. They neared their destination and Temari fell back slightly, allowing Naruto to pull in front of her. Itachi and Kisame stood in the street, watching as the main door to the central tower was pushed open and an old man walked towards them, leaning on his staff for support. How nice to see you again, Kisame-san. I have to say I wasn't expecting you. Kisame scratched the back of his head. Of the two of us, Zark-sama, I can assure you I'm the more surprised. You appear to be unarmed today, but I'm more interested in how those friends of yours managed to get my daughter away from here. Simple. I relied on the fact that you hadn't told her anything about the person or people you were after, so there was no way for her to know that there were 4 of us. Ah, so you remembered how much I enjoy being cryptic, do you? I will never forget. You were the one who first told me that a mission is no fun when you know what's going to happen. That may be true, but a mission is also no fun when the enemy is unarmed, so I suggest you remedy that problem quickly. Oh, don't worry. A certain white-haired medic nin's hands were tapping his tree rhythmically. When the chimes ring 5, 6 and 7, we'll be right in 7th heaven. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Blasting into the campsite, Naruto grabbed Samehada and jumped as high as he could. A nanosecond later, Temari had her fan and through no small feat of acrobatics, opened it and sent a shockwave of air straight up, launching Naruto high above the trees. Holding Samehada by the hilt, like a javelin, Naruto forced as much chakra as he could into his arm, causing a few veins to pop out and a small spurt of blood, and threw the sharkskin blade as hard as he could. Seraphim looked up as the sword flew over her head at near supersonic speeds. Samehada. She twisted in midair, hitting the next branch backwards and launching herself back the way she had come. Zark was continuing to smile politely. So, Kisame, did you ever manage to get the feel for that backhand twist cut? Nah, could never get the timing quite perfect, so I figured out a way to compensate by speeding up my backhand cross cut. Not as graceful, but equally effective. Itachi slowly shifted his gaze between the two swordsmen, finally settling on Zark. So, I hear you saw Naruto at a restaurant. Naruto? So that's his name. Well then, give him my compliments if you see him, because his sensory attunement is truly amazing. I'm sure he'll appreciate praise from one such as yourself. Whoa, Kisame cut in, here it comes. Running over to a wall and running up it, Kisame backflipped off and grabbed Samehada as it flew past, landing lightly in a crouch. Sorry for the delay. I'm ready now. Zark grabbed his wooden staff by its thick end, his hand facing the ground, and flipped the staff so he was holding it like a sword. Excellent. I was getting impatient. Itachi blinked. Am I fighting too? Of course, Zark said as if it were obvious. Kisame alone won't keep me entertained for very long. As he spoke, a ripple rolled down his staff, the wood seeming to melt into the shape of a blade. Wait a second, you're going to fight Kisame and me with a wooden sword? Kisame's sweat dropped. Itachi. Why yes, I am. Do you have a problem with that? Not really, but... The Uchiha blinked. Zark was gone. He threw himself to one side out of pure instinct, and the earth exploded behind him. When he looked again, Zark's wooden sword was embedded halfway into where he had been standing, and the old man himself was balanced on top. My, and I'd heard that the Uchiha had the best eyes anywhere. Do try to keep up with me next time. There was a blur of movement and Itachi again got himself out of the way with fractions of a second to spare. Temari looked around nervously as they ran through the forest away from the city, now rearmed and resupplied. Are you sure it's okay to leave them like that? Naruto shrugged. Well, Kisame said we'd just get in the way, and considering the opponent, I'm inclined to believe him. She looked at him skeptically, but there is the small matter of the fact that I'd rather not have to fight a sword master of hidden mist, but Kisame said they'd be fine, and we have to trust him on that. And I'm too sexy for the leaf. Too sexy for the leaf. I like pot-stewed beef. Kabuto was now at the point of making up his own lyrics, and realized with a start that he was rather hungry. Chapter 30, Dark Waters. Itachi examined their current situation grimly. Brilliant plan you came up with, Kisame. With only seconds having passed, Itachi counted no less than 3 cuts of varying depth on his own body, and approximately the same had been inflicted on Kisame. It was a position the two were not used to being in. Zark didn't seem to have a particularly enormous amount of chakra, but his skills and style were on a whole different level than anything the two Nukenin had ever faced. The old man stood there so innocuously, daring one of them to attack him. The Uchiha was quickly realizing the benefits of wooden swords, the primary being their lack of weight. Despite his skill, Itachi had no doubt that but for his Sharingan, he would have been dead after the first strike. Zark was at least as fast as him, and far faster than Kisame, but he lacked the ability to block the man's surprisingly deadly wooden sword, which Kisame could by way of Samehada. So in summary, Itachi concluded, Zark possessed a level of skill approximately equal to that of Kisame and himself combined. As if suddenly bored by the lack of action, Zark suddenly vanished again, but this time Itachi was prepared. His eyes could just barely keep up with the old man, so he had to dodge again, but he twisted and dove right, so if Zark wanted to close for a second strike, he would have to pincer himself between Itachi and Kisame. Not appearing overly concerned, the old man did just that. The Uchiha tried to dodge again, but felt a telltale burn in his leg where the wooden blade cut into his muscle. Shifting his weight to his other foot, Itachi tried to counterattack just as Kisame took advantage of the opening Zark's back left him. Still wearing that infernal smile, Zark grabbed Itachi's wrist and flung him over Kisame's head while bringing his sword round to parry Samehada, catching the shark man off balance and sending him following Itachi's trajectory with a well-placed kick. And I had such high expectations for the two of you. Now I'm all disappointed. Itachi pushed Kisame off him and dragged himself up. Well, apparently this will require more planning than usual. Kisame shook his head to clear it. No shit. I don't suppose you have any brilliant ideas? The Uchiha didn't at first, but taking a slow step forward he heard a crunch under his foot. I might just have a couple. Do you remember what I once called the most useless skill ever? Flashback. Kisame took his sword and swung it into a tree, barely even scratching the bark, but suddenly all the leaves fell off it and slowly floated to the ground. Itachi looked at him dully. So you can create vibrations, who cares? That's the most useless skill I've ever seen. End flashback. Yeah, well, I want you to do it now. That building behind us first and then the street. I have no idea what you're thinking, but it has to be better than what we've been doing so far. Taking a couple cautious steps backwards, his eyes still on Zark, Kisame suddenly slammed Samehada into the wall behind him. The shockwave was visible as the whole building shook and the windows shattered in rapid succession, starting with those nearest to Kisame. The cloud of broken glass fell towards the earth and Itachi dashed forward. Zark watched the Uchiha's movements curiously, but just as he was running to intercept, he felt a small scratch on his face and stopped cold, figuring out the trick. Clever, Uchiha. Very clever. Glass continued to fall, and Kisame smashed his sword into the ground, sending a shockwave through the earth this time, the vibrations launching what glass had already hit the ground back into the air. He repeated this every few seconds, keeping the air filled with glass. Zark let the shards fall over him as he contemplated. The falling glass meant that both he and Itachi would be severely restricted in their motions, because the faster they moved, the more damage they would receive from the glass. Standing still, it was just like having small pebbles and rocks dropped on you, but at high speeds, the tiny chunks of glass would cut as well as any kunai. Still advancing, Itachi grabbed a couple of the larger pieces and threw them like shuriken, forcing Zark to dodge as fast as he dared. As he felt the sting of another cut on his face, the old man was finally starting to enjoy himself. Interesting strategy, but all you've done is slow me down. How do you plan on overpowering me? Grabbing more of the larger shards, Itachi closed the distance between them. To an outsider, the exchange of blows that followed would be almost comical, as both combatants moved and attacked exaggeratedly slowly, for fear of crippling themselves. Hissing as he received a gash on his hand, Zark backpedaled quickly. Both he and Itachi were covered in a great many small cuts, but the sword master figured he was faring slightly better. About to advance for another skirmish, Zark suddenly looked up for a moment, then glanced at Kisame before refocusing on his opponent. "I'm afraid I must cut our game short," fun as it was turning out to be. Itachi, looking far more haggard than usual, laughed darkly. "And how do you plan on cutting it short? You're in almost as bad shape as me, old man." With a sigh, Zark closed his eyes and simply felt the glass as it fell and the vibrations under his feet as they echoed through the earth. "Your name is Itachi, right? Let me say then, Itachi, that I would most definitely like to fight you again someday." Opening his eyes once more, Zark threw his sword away to one side of the street. Ignoring the looks of disbelief he was receiving, he smiled disarmingly. "But today you shall learn that talent is no substitute for experience." He formed a single seal, then thrust his right arm into the air, Leviathan. As his mind slowly emerged from its confusion, the first thing he felt was pain. A rather lot of pain. Kisame forced his eyes open. What the hell? His sight was blurry, but he managed to focus when a long-forgotten face appeared in his field of vision. "Seraphim? Why are you here? You should be in the forest somewhere, chasing Naruto and Temari." "Well, for one, I'm keeping a useless chunk of flesh named Kisame alive. Where's Itachi? I remember using vibration transfer, but my memory starts to blur. And why am I all wet?" Reaching down, she grabbed him by the collar and dragged him into a sitting position. Kisame blinked a couple of times as he tried to take everything in. He was still in the street, which was now filled with workers and covered in 6 inches of water and glass. Itachi was laying face down a few feet away, his back covered in bandages. "How long was I out?" Seraphim dropped down next to him. 30 or so minutes. "And where then exactly is your father?" "Not sure, but he left right before I arrived, 'cause the two of you had just begun to bleed. You know, it's strange, because based on how much my side is killing me, one would think I should at least remember being injured. He used it, so your brain probably wasn't able to keep up with what was happening right before you were hit, thus causing mild memory loss." Kisame laughed, coughing up some blood in the process. "So that was it? This is just perfect. I was witness to one of the greatest legends in mist history and can't remember a damn thing. You should just be thankful you're still breathing." "Yeah, about that, why am I alive? I have a hard time believing you bandaged me and Itachi out of pity." "Ha! Fuck no. I would have skewered you, but my father likes strong people, and probably wouldn't like my killing someone he went out of his way to leave alive." Kisame lay back down slowly and grinned. "Nice to see that you're as charming as always ever, Seraph. You think flattery will get you anywhere?" "Not really, but hey, why not give it a shot? I don't suppose you have any idea where my dad might have gone?" Nope." The woman leaned forward and rested her head on her knees. "Since he went out of his way to leave right before I arrived, I can assume he's going to do something that I wouldn't approve of." "Yeah, but there are so many things that fall into that category. How is it possible that you've managed to become more immature with the passage of time?" "Pure talent, babe." A sound was made a few feet away as Itachi shifted and rolled over, wincing as his back hit ground. "What the hell?" Naruto and Temari ran across the water, both soaked from falling in a few times each. "Okay, whose idea was it to run across the ocean?" Temari smacked him, causing him to fall in again. "It was your idea." Naruto dragged himself out of the water, running up one side of a wave and down the other. "We need to get to the mainland tonight." Waiting for a ferry wasn't an option. But running on water doesn't allow for any rest, a stressful enough situation, not even considering that at any given time we don't know how much longer we'll have to go. No other options were open to us. Kisame told us to get to the mainland tonight, and I intend to do that no matter what. Flashback. Kisame took Naruto off to a corner of the Puba's office, speaking quietly and quickly. "Now listen here, Zark is way out of your league, and way out of my league, but Itachi and I together have a chance. The most you and Temari can do for us is to lead Seraphim as far away as possible, because if she joins her father we stand no chance at all. No matter whether we win or lose this fight, the mist will be after you in full force, so escape to the mainland tonight and keep a low profile for a little while." Naruto balked, "But that would be abandoning you. I told you, Zark could crush you without a second thought, and I have another task for you." He pressed a piece of paper into Naruto's hand. 3 months from now, go to this location, it's where my brother is hiding out. If all goes well, Itachi and I will be waiting for you there. If not, I want you to tell Kirin that I went down fighting and wouldn't have had it any other way. The implication shook Naruto to his bones. Kisame ignored him and calmly walked back to where the others were hurriedly discussing strategy. Don't think about it, Naruto, just do it. End flashback. A cold wind blew across Naruto's face as he ran across the water. I will not fail. On the shore far behind them, Zark sat on a cliff. He supposed that he could have gone after them across the sea, but he was really in no particular rush. Besides, it had been years since he had indulged in a good chase. He momentarily considered the position his daughter was now in, but dismissed this concern as well. After all, he mused, the experience would build character. 13 days later. Hidden Sand was not anything resembling a thriving metropolis, yet even on the hottest of days, a few people would always be active. Gaara was one of those people. Not so much because he enjoyed the heat, as because he enjoyed the fact that no one else enjoyed the heat, allowing him to wander the near-empty streets. But the Sand Boy was troubled on this particular day, and even more troubled because he wasn't exactly sure what was troubling him. He knew there was nothing at all logical about this feeling, but he couldn't help it. He continued to wander, finding himself at the east edge of the village, looking out over the desert. It was the wind, he decided. There was only a warm breeze, but it sent foreboding shivers down his spine. Something, he said quietly, as if afraid he might be heard, something is going to happen soon. Many miles farther to the east than Gaara's gaze could reach, just outside a small town whose name was not even known by the Sand Boy, two people lay huddled in a sleeping bag. They had done nothing but run, eat and sleep since that fateful day in the country of water. Naruto wasn't sure what it was that was driving him to keep such a brutal pace, but he felt the need to run in his bones. He shifted and poked Temari, waking her. Time to go. Temari yawned. How long did we sleep? 3 hours. That's not enough. It will have to be, since we need to leave. They slept mostly clothed, so once awake, it took the two of them only 3 minutes to be ready to leave. Naruto flexed his leg muscles to loosen them. Ready? Yeah. Sleep-deprived and with their muscles burning, they set off again, determined to reach the relative safety of Hidden Sand. As twilight fell, Zark ran his hands over the ground on which Kubikiri Hocho had been laid only a few hours earlier. Lucky. I might catch up tomorrow. Lifting his gaze, he watched the almost unheard of sight of dark clouds gathering in the desert sky and he spoke to the air. Getting impatient, are we? A flash of lighting lacerated its way to Earth, and in the empty desert, the old man's eyes reflected a deep blue light. I know, and to tell the truth, I'm exited as well. The last vestiges of sunlight vanished, immersing the world in darkness. Sakura navigated her way through piles of bound books, scrolls, and various other knickknacks. Excuse me, Hanzo-sama. The Hokage sent me to get your report. Hanzo emerged from what had moments earlier appeared to be a solid wall of literature. Sakura swore his house must employ some sort of genjutsu, since he was the only one who could figure out how to get anywhere. He looked elated. I may have found it, Sakura-san. Found what? I've been refreshing my knowledge of ancient languages, and might have found a clue to the identity of the demon who subdued the village. He held a scroll out for her to see, which meant absolutely nothing to her. I'm sorry, but I don't. Oh, wrong scroll, how silly of me to forget, Hanzo said excitedly. See, this scroll contains information written by a group of people who used to worship demons. Sakura blanched. Worship demons? Yes, and it's not so crazy when you think about it. They served the demons in return for protection and power, and this symbiotic relationship continued for hundreds of years, until a young chief scorned the demon race and the people were wiped out. Now this is mostly irrelevant, but these people kept the best-known records of the different demons, along with information about them. Then why didn't you check their records before? Oh, the demon religion existed long after our assailant disappeared from history, but I hoped to find some clues in their records and I did. Digging through the pockets of his robes, Hanzo pulled out a second scroll and unfurled it, and this one Sakura could read. Hanzo continued to go on about his discovery, but Sakura had stopped listening in favor of reading the scroll. Anubis. Keldorn. Raksha. Oh. Here's Kyubi. She suddenly pointed to the scroll. What's this name here? Leviathan. Oh, no. There's some dispute among historians how to pronounce that one. He's a water demon who, every few hundred years, terrorizes ships at sea. Although we can never get all the pronunciations perfect because of the language gap, I like to call him Leviathan. Chapter 31, Things Long Forgotten. Sakura shivered at the list of demonic names. Just reading them gave her chills. So people used to worship all these demons? Yes, but that's not what's important. You probably aren't experienced enough to know this, but further down on the scroll there's instructions on how to commune with the demons, and the ritual is almost exactly the same as a summoning jutsu. Sakura was lost, so that means what exactly? I think that demons and summoning animals are the same thing. But then, why would we have two names for them? I'm sorry, Sakura-san, I was being imprecise. I believe they are the same type of creatures with one defining difference. What we call summoning animals become demons when they gain the ability to enter the human dimension without having to be summoned. Meaning, Hanzo flicked her forehead, of all the things ancient civilizations tried to record, one thing was paramount, their summoning contracts. So we can find those and cross-reference them with the descriptions of that chain demon. Don't get so excited, Sakura-san. It's a relatively small discovery, but it gets us one step closer to our goal. She knew perfectly well that he couldn't move, yet Seraphim found herself checking in on Kisame more and more frequently. It was something about the way he looked at her from his prone position in his hospital bed, like he knew some great secret and was keeping it from her just for the sake of his own amusement. She reached her hand towards the handle of his door, but suddenly retracted it when she heard movement from inside the room. It was an almost silent rustle, easily dismissed as that of shifting blankets, but Seraphim somehow knew was more than that. Silently promising to pay the hospital back, she kicked in the door with her sword drawn. Stop whatever you're doing. Kisame looked up from his small table. Hey Seraph. Wanna join me for lunch? The shark man looked like he had barely managed to get from his bed to the table at the side of the room, and had a tray of almost edible-looking hospital food in front of him. I thought you were trying to escape, she said rather lamely. Kisame looked pointedly at the door now embedded in the wall across from where it had until recently swung on its hinges. Yeah, I noticed. I don't suppose it occurred to you that people very rarely go from mangled to completely healthy over the course of 3 hours. A sudden thought caused him to amend his previous statement, unless we were talking about Naruto, of course. Seraphim pulled the door from where it had landed and examined it dejectedly. This is going to cost a lot of money, and I'm not even getting paid for this so-called mission. A bite of what Kisame had decided to be Plastiegg vanished into his razor-filled maw. I'd like to say that I've been trying to make this whole ordeal easier for you. Seraphim rolled her eyes. Somehow I know how you're going to finish that sentence. Kisame smirked. I'd like to say it, but I'd be lying. Seraphim impulsively dropped into the chair across from Kisame and leaned against the wall, her voice becoming airy with a forced feeling of casualness. You really don't change, do you, Kisame? The man's expression turned wry. Not much, Seraph. I'm pretty much the same as I've always been. She reached and scooped up some of his mashed potato on her finger, popping it into her mouth. Blah, they actually feed you this crap. It's not so bad once you get used to it. This tastes like sawdust. How could you get used to it? Kisame reached under the table and pulled out a bottle. Just swish this around in your mouth for 30 seconds or so before you eat. Seraphim blanched. This is hot sauce. You wouldn't be able to taste anything after 30 seconds of swishing this around in your mouth. Exactly, he said as he took another bite of the Plastiegg. Somehow I don't think I'll ever understand you. Kisame continued to eat until his tray was clean of anything resembling food, then lay back in his contentedly. This may seem random, but have you ever regretted teaching me? Seraphim blinked. That was random. No, really? Even when I used the skills you taught me to become a Nukenin, I trusted you to make the right decision, and so I have always had faith that for you, becoming a Nukenin was the right decision. Besides, you put fear back into the corrupt government of Water Country, so Hidden Mist might be better off this way. Kisame looked at the ceiling. Better off, huh? Flashback. It was the beginning of winter, and there was just a hint of a chill in the air. A light wind blew over a large crowd of people, in which a young Seraphim stood in awe of the stage set up in the center square of the village. The Mizukichi was making a speech of some kind, but she was fully focused on the men who stood behind him. They were a newly established organization that stood above even the ANBU, and embodied the power of their village. They were the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. She knew all of their faces, and had even worked with a couple of them on missions, but they now seemed somehow more impressive, as if they became more powerful simply by virtue of now being one of the 7 Swordsmen. The Mizukichi finished his speech and her father stood up to say a few words, after which there was the obligatory applause and the 7 filed off stage. The crowd started to disperse and Seraphim made her way around to where her father was talking with a couple of the 7 in a small tent. A small group of people, mostly girls, had remained behind in hopes of meeting some of the legendary swordsmen, and so Seraphim stayed near the edge of the group. Normally she would have gone and joined her father in his discussion, but she didn't want to have to dig through fangirls to get there. Letting her eyes wander, she caught sight of movement near the back of the tent, where it looked like someone had just ducked out. Lacking anything better to do, she ducked out herself and ran along the outside edge of the tent until she caught sight of a man's back. "Hey you." He ignored her, which only spurred her on. "Hey, I'm talking to you." "Yes, you." Seraphim wasn't able to see the man's eyebrow twitch, but twitching it was. "Go away, woman." "Hey. You're Hoshigaki. Why are you out here?" He turned to glare at her, and she got her first good look at his face. "People piss me off, so I'm going to where there aren't any people." He had now succeeded in pissing her off. "Don't be such a jackass. Next to being Mizukage, you were just given the highest honor available in the Hidden Mist, so the least you can do is be at least a little grateful." Kisame now turned fully round to face her. "Grateful? That's a riot, especially coming from you. Don't think I don't know who you are, girlie. You're Zark's little princess daughter who's probably never even been in a real fight, so screw off before I get mad." Inside the tent, still chatting, Zark felt a disturbingly familiar chakra flare up seconds before explosions were heard. That night, Kisame and Seraphim got to share a cell. She picked up a small chunk of broken concrete and threw it at him. "This is your fault, you know. How could this be, in any possible way, my fault? You attacked me. You provoked me. I provoke people all the time, but most of them don't go crazy and attack me." Seraphim tried to swing at him, but a pain in her side flared up and she just landed on her face. Kisame whistled. "Got you good, didn't I?" She groaned slightly. "I'll admit that you're pretty strong for a fuckwad. You're not so bad yourself, for a psychotic bitch." Managing to get herself seated comfortably against the wall, Seraphim laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment. But really, how did you get chosen to be one of the 7? What are you talking about?" "I got in because I'm strong." "Maybe, but your strategic skills are barely genin level." She kicked his ankle for emphasis, and enjoyed watching him flinch. "You nicked me, so what? There was an opening in your defenses. Your sword skills are near flawless, but you're open to attacks from things like..." She kicked his ankle again. "Kunai. Still, the woman who got her side sliced shouldn't be lecturing me." "I'm not lecturing, I'm just pointing out that someone as strong as you has such an easily fixable weakness, yet you don't do anything about it." Kisame waved his hand dismissively. "If it was such an easy weakness to overcome, my teachers would have taught me by now." Even as Kisame said the words, a seed of doubt had been planted inside him, and Seraphim was having similar thoughts. It was extremely strange for someone like Kisame to have such an obvious chink in his defenses, particularly when all his other skills were off the charts. The woman continued to consider this conundrum and looked out through the bars into the small cell block contained in the basement of the police station. The two of them could easily break out of jail if they wanted to, but they stayed inside, in the same way that children go to their room when told. Shinobi stay in jail when ordered to so as to acknowledge authority. She was struck by realization and looked back at Kisame. "Authority?" The man blinked. "What?" The next morning, they were let out of their cell and made a great show of snubbing each other and stomping off in different directions, but that night, they met in a clearing just outside the village wall. They continued to meet like that every night, and took only a week to discover that Seraphim's darkest suspicions had been correct. It took almost no time at all for Kisame to overcome some of his greatest weaknesses, and he soon fixed all the holes in his defense. They trained to exhaustion every night, and while the purpose was to help Kisame, Seraphim found that her own blade skills were being sharpened as well. After a month, they progressed from simple combat tactics to small group and large-scale tactics, yet more areas where Kisame was horribly lacking. Contrary to his muscleman image, he absorbed information like a sponge, progressing faster than almost anyone Seraphim had ever seen. They went through massively complex theoretical battle situations of all types, and once the strategies were explained, Kisame never once made a mistake. As they worked more and more, both Seraphim and Kisame had to face what they had first discussed in that cell all those months ago. It was now clear that Kisame's training had been flawed, and not unintentionally. Seraphim estimated that ever since the age of 13, Kisame's teachers had been crippling him by leaving out large portions of training that all shinobi are supposed to have. After 4 months of the two training together, the cause of this became blindingly obvious. The higher-ups in the village were afraid of him, and with good reason. He had only months ago been the weakest of the 7 swordsmen, and on a fresh day near the beginning on spring, he made a declaration before the Mizukage. Zabuza and Sage, ranked 5th and 6th in strength as far as the 7 swordsmen went, were out on missions, so Kisame challenged the other 4 to face him in combat. The Mizukage figured it would at least make a good spectacle, so he allowed Kisame alone to take on the top 4 of the 7 swordsmen all at once. It was indeed a spectacle, and a large portion of the village watched as Kisame calmly and methodically obliterated them. The village council and Mizukage watch in horror as more than 10 years of conspiracy were blown away like dust in the wind as the top 4 shinobi in the village were publicly thrashed. Zark, who, although not involved, had known about the council's intentional limiting of Kisame's power, felt a sinking feeling in his belly as he watched his daughter smile triumphantly as the battle unfolded. Over the next few months, Kisame and Seraphim started to spend time together publicly, and whispers started to spread. They seemed like the last 2 people on Earth to become friends, let alone more than friends, but even Zark had to admit that when they weren't trying to kill each other, they got along well. Many questioned Seraphim's taste, but everyone said it was only a matter of time before the 2 of them took their relationship to the next level. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. It was exactly a year after the formation of the 7 Swordsmen, and the Mizukage was hosting a dinner in their honor, but this day was especially important for Kisame. It was a day off for most shinobi, so Seraphim slept until noon, only to be woken up by someone shaking her enthusiastically. "What the? Kisame? What happened to your hands?" Kisame's hands were wrapped in bandages, but he paid them no mind and moved to one side so he could hold something up for her to see. "It's called Samahata. It was just finished this morning." Still sleepy, she reached out and poked the strange blade with her finger. "Man, your brother is really something. This looks like one hell of a sword. I haven't really tested it out yet, but I can use it to absorb chakra. Amazing. Now let me sleep." Kisame sighed amusedly as Seraphim rolled over in bed and pointedly ignored him. "Fine, then, but I assume you will remember to get up in time to go to the dinner tonight?" "I won't forget, so let me sleep or I'll hurt you." Kisame stuck his tongue out at her but grabbed Samahata and made his way over to the door. "You better get in time, or I'm going to tip you out of bed." He slipped out the door just in time to avoid a thrown pillow and vaulted over her apartment railing on the slightly wet ground below. Having a brand new sword, Kisame was faced with the constant temptation to try it out on things, and had to fight said temptation constantly as he wandered through the village. Finally deciding that he was going to go crazy if he couldn't smash something, Kisame made his way to one of the Jounin training fields. The field was empty, so Kisame stretched out his arms and lifted Samahata one-handed up to shoulder level while keeping his arm fully extended. He could definitely feel the difference in weight from his old sword, and he was going to suck in combat until he could compensate. He was just about to take his first swing when he heard the grass rustle behind him. "Oi, fish for brains, you got a minute?" "That depends, Zabuza. What do you want me for?" The Devil of the Mist shoved his hands in his pockets. "I'm not generally a helpful person, Kisame, but I figure you're the least idiotic of the people around here, so I'm going to give you a little warning." Kisame shifted his sword from his right hand to his left. "A warning about what?" "The Mizukage received word of your new sword being finished and immediately called a special council meeting. They're in there right now discussing whether to have you assassinated in your sleep." There was a dull thump as Samahata hit the ground, having fallen from Kisame's now limp hand. Zabuza looked at the fallen sword with mild interest. That new blade of yours does look first-rate. I can see why the Mizukage is in a panic." "Oh, and of course, if anyone asks, we never had this conversation." Zabuza's image blurred and he vanished with a poof, leaving Kisame alone in the training field. The shark man just stood there, unmoving, his brain devoting all its power to figuring out what he was supposed to do now. Even he had never dreamed the council would go so far as to order him killed, but Zabuza had no reason to deceive him, and as he thought about it, he really wouldn't put anything past a council that had conspired for years just to keep him weak. As the day passed, he continued to stand in the same spot, and after almost 3 hours of no movement, he reached down and grasped Samahata by the hilt. "So they think they can kill me, do they?" He held the sharkskin blade in the air, and couldn't help but notice that there was no sign of the heaviness from earlier. He smiled then, and his smile slowly widened into the malevolent and slightly manic grin for which he would, from that day on, be famous. "We'll see who kills who." He arrived to pick her up at the agreed time, but Seraphim couldn't help but feel that there was something wrong with Kisame as they went to the dinner. His eyes seemed cold and distant, like his mind was somewhere else. They split up at the entrance to the dining hall since Kisame had to go sit at the table for the 7 swordsmen and Seraphim was expected to sit at the head table with her father. Kisame sat and took in the room. Everyone here was a potential enemy, waiting to spear him when he was least expecting. Poke! He almost jumped out of his chair as he felt a poke in his side and looked down. A small girl was poking him in the side, apparently oblivious to his anxiety. He grabbed her arm and she looked up at him innocently. "Hello, Kisame-sama." Zabuza sat down on the other side of the little girl. "Don't be a nuisance, Mako." "Aw. But I want to play with Kisame-san." "You have to be quiet now, but I'll let you swim in the lake after, okay? Mako carefully considered her uncle's offer in her unique 6-year-old way. Why? Swimming. The Mizukage stood up and started to talk. In fact, most of what the Mizukage did was talk, to the point where that became his primary skill. This was the type of thing Seraphim pondered as he made his speech. She glanced at Kisame and a shiver went down her spine. His eyes looked so cold compared to usual, there was none of the fire his eyes usually concealed. She resolved to talk to him about it later and was just about to look away when she heard a sudden grating cough. The little girl next to Kisame spewed out a stream of milk that engulfed her entire table, and thus, the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Mako coughed a few more times as Zabuza patted her on the back. Once she caught her breath, she looked up at the milk-drenched swordsman. Sorry. From that day on, it felt to Seraphim like Kisame was drifting farther and farther away from humanity. He had always been a loner, but now she was the only one in the village who ever saw him. He spent the majority of his time practicing with Samahata on the outskirts of the village and would rarely give her more than 2 or 3 word responses when he would talk to her at all. He sunk deeper and deeper into himself, until the first day of spring, 15 months after they had met, when he told her to meet him in the 3rd training field at midnight. She approached the pitch-black clearing with a sense of trepidation, not sure what to expect, but Kisame was just standing in the middle of the field casually leaning Samahata against his shoulder. He looked over to her as she approached and smiled his first real smile in months. I'm glad you came, Seraph. What are you up to, Kisame? I know you, and you're planning something big. Don't talk, Seraphim, just listen. Tonight is the last time we're ever likely to see each other, so I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. You've been good to me, and next few days will be hard on you, but as it turns out, all I can say is sorry. Hey wait, you can't just say something like that and… Kisame was gone, and Seraphim was left alone in the field. The next morning, Anbu broke her door down. Ikana Seraphim, we are sorry to intrude, but under orders of the Mizukage, we are taking you into custody as the last known person to see Hoshigaki Kisame, who as of 27 minutes ago, is registered as a missing nin of the Hidden Mist. End flashback. Seraphim started to get uneasy as Kisame continued to stare at the ceiling, and was about to call for a nurse when he suddenly broke out of his reverie. Do you remember what I told you the last time we saw each other in Hidden Mist? Of course, you said you were sorry. Kisame lowered his gaze so he was looking at her again. I hate to say this, Seraph, but I need to apologize again. For what? You haven't done anything this time. In fact, you've made my father happier than he's been in ages. As she was speaking, some part of Seraphim's brain realized something rather significant. Kisame's eyes weren't focused quite as one would expect. He wasn't looking at her, but past her. She instinctually pivoted, and realized her mistake nanoseconds too late as she was entranced by 2 burning red orbs in what was otherwise a suddenly pitch-black room. She collapsed in a heap and Kisame hopped up from his chair, snapping off his casts. Thanks, Itachi. Let's roll. Did we really have to delay our escape by 6 days? Yeah, I had some things that I had to ask. This woman makes you unusually emotional. Itachi observed coolly. That's true, Kisame conceded as he pulled on his shirt. She makes me act irrationally and go against my better judgment, even to the point of delaying our escape. He paused to pull on his shoes. She makes me lose my cool and leaves my emotions in a mess. Put succinctly, she completely screws me up. Kisame took a moment to admire his now fully clothed form in the mirror, and then strode past the Uchiha towards the doorless door. And if you're really lucky, Itachi, someday you'll meet someone who will do the same for you. They had been running to the point of collapse, but Naruto watched the gathering storm and knew they weren't going to make it. He wasn't sure about exactly what was following them, but he knew they weren't going to escape it. Or at least, he wasn't. He grabbed Temari's arm. Stop. What? You almost made me fall. How far are we from Hidden Sand? About 8 hours, I'd guess. Naruto looked at the ground. 8 hours? The only way either of us is going to survive this is if you go on without me. Temari whacked him upside the head. I am not leaving you here just so you can be heroic. I'm not suggesting it to be heroic. I'm saying it's the only way we are going to survive. With the help of Gaara and some sand nin, we might stand a chance against what's after me, but not otherwise. So then what are you going to do until I get back with help? Naruto smiled easily. I'm going to wait for you. She grabbed a clump of his hair and kissed him roughly. You better stay alive. No problem, I promise. Temari ran into the desert night with a new vigor, and Naruto watched her go with mixed feelings. Even at his most optimistic, he had maybe 2 hours before whatever it was got to him. It was 8 hours to Hidden Sand, and then another 8 back. so he would have to hold his ground for 14 straight hours. He collapsed on his back and looked up at the moon. I'll try to keep my promise, Temari. He covered his eyes with one hand. I'll try with everything I have. But, an hour and 10 minutes later, Temari passed through another village and decided she had to eat something. As much as she wanted to keep running, she knew she would collapse without sustenance. The first thing she saw was a ramen stand, so she stumbled in and demanded a bowl of pork ramen as fast as it could be made. She lay her head on the counter and looked hazily at the man next to her. Hey, mister, what's this place called? What? This town, what's it called? It's called Ocean, but are you alright? Temari laughed semi-deliriously. Ha! A place in the desert called Ocean, but I need to remember, an hour south of Ocean, an hour south of Ocean, an hour south of Ocean. The man rubbed his head. Miss, I really think you should go to a hospital or something. Her pork ramen arrived and Temari grabbed the bowl and left the stand. The owner looked stunned. Hey! That's my bowl. And you didn't pay for the ramen. Temari looked back. Charge it to Hidden Sand. At the other end of the ramen bar, a man sat perplexed as Temari ran off. Had she really not recognized him? Was she playing dumb as part of some plan? Was she on some kind of drug? The more he thought, the more confused he got, but he figured he had one clue. An hour south, ha! Naruto opened his eyes and sat up. How long have you been there? 50 feet away, Zark smiled. Oh, just a couple minutes. Awfully considerate of you to let me sleep. I came all this way to fight you, Naruto-kun, not kill you. He smiled wider, though I can't promise I won't. Naruto stood up and reached into his mind. Alright, bastard fox. If there was ever a time to fight your hardest, this is it. To his surprise, the response was both immediate and strong. I will. The fox seemed really riled up. The last time Naruto remembered him being this energetic was when he fought Gaara. His hands suddenly clenched around Siri Kirite's handle. Impossible. Zark threw his staff to one side and formed a single seal. I hope you won't mind, Naruto-kun, if I start off at full power. And by full power, I of course mean, his eyes suddenly narrowed. Leviathan. Chakra exploded outward and Zark watched as Naruto struggled to fight against the waves of blue energy with disappointment. I may have vastly overestimated you, Naruto-kun, if you can't even stand up to a little raw chakra. With a sigh of annoyance, Zark drew a kunai and vanished in a blur, appearing behind the boy and driving it towards his skull. The old man was more than surprised to hear the clang of metal on metal. The old man was suddenly blown back and dug his feet into the sand as a vortex of crimson chakra consumed the boy. Naruto looked at him with unholy fire in his eyes. Don't fuck with me, old man. There's no way Itachi and Kisame would have lost to that kind of pathetic strength. Zark looked delighted. Wonderful, Naruto-kun. This will be even more fun than I imagined. The boy's voice had a demonic edge to it. I suppose now you're going to show me your full power? Hardly. I wouldn't be much of a shinobi unless I kept a few tricks in reserve, but then again, I'm not much of a swordsman without a sword, now am I? Saying this, he rolled up his right sleeve, revealing a complex tattoo that the blue chakra seemed to condense on. The tattoo suddenly glowed bright red and there was a poof of smoke, which blew away almost immediately to reveal the largest sword Naruto had ever seen. His response was therefore appropriate. Damn, that's a big sword. It's called Jayakuryu, and I haven't used it in combat for 7 years now, so this is quite an event for me. You didn't use that thing on Itachi and Kisame. I didn't need to. Whether you intended to or not, Naruto-kun, you have chosen the perfect battlefield to face me on. How do you mean? Leviathan can control water, so with his help it's easy to surround my feet with an inch-thick bubble that allows me to move at 3 or 4 times my normal speed. But here. Naruto grinned. No water, and any you did accumulate on your feet would be sucked up by the sand. So it would appear, Zark said as he hefted the massive bastard sword, that our speeds are now almost even. Naruto knew he was still slower, but now had built up some confidence. Zark was not invincible, and from the way the blue and red chakra vortexes were pushing against each other, the old man was about even with him in chakra capacity as well. Unfortunately, the boy knew he was vastly inferior with regards to technique, so if he was going to hold out, he would have to attack hard, fast, and when Zark was least expecting it. In fact, with the old man's eyes closed and him looking rather out of it, right then seemed like a pretty good time. He burst forward and adjusted his hand grip for an upwards cross cut. Zark opened one eye. Foolish. He brought the massive blade to bear faster than Naruto would have though possible, so fast in fact, that Naruto could barely follow its trail. He was only more confused though, once he did see its trail. Even with its size, the sword was moving so fast it was going to complete its swing before he was in the strike zone. In other words, it was going to miss him. Naruto enjoyed a moment of bliss before he realized that an opponent of this caliber wasn't likely to make such a mistake. Zark's single open eye narrowed to a slit and pulsed with dark light, Kamaitachi. Unable to even think of evasion, Naruto ran headlong into the shockwave and was sent hurling backwards, slamming into a sand dune with a dull crunch. Naruto pulled himself out of the sand. Well, that wasn't a very good idea, and with a name like Jayakuryu. I wasn't even thinking. Zark smiled amiably again. To define it, Jayakuryu is a stretch of turbulent water in a river or the sea caused by one current flowing into or across another current. In other words, Naruto coughed and spit out some blood, a riptide. First make. The specs of Jayakuryu, riptide. A 12-foot bastard sword, having an 8-foot blade and 4-foot handle, Jayakuryu stands as the largest weapon in my Narutoverse. Bastard swords are designed and weighted to be usable with 1 or 2 hands, primarily with 2, a fact that shouldn't change as you increase the size, making them extremely versatile as far as swords go. They have straight double-edged blades and are a kinf hybrid between a long strad and two-handed sword. Initially, I mistakenly referred to bastard sword as being another name for long sword, which, after further research, I have discovered is untrue. Today we learn that Wikipedia is not always right. Jayakuryu gets its name from the fact that if swung at a specific angle and with sufficient velocity, a vacuum is created directly behind the blade, which in turn creates powerful and turbulent winds. Designed to catch its victims off guard, Jayakuryu is a weapon to be feared. Second make. This is actually how I first wrote this scene, but I realized as soon as I was finished that it was way too silly. Saying this, he rolled up his right sleeve, revealing a complex tattoo that the blue chakra seemed to condense on. The tattoo suddenly glowed bright red and there was a poof of smoke, which blew away almost immediately to reveal the largest sword Naruto had ever seen. His response was therefore appropriate. Damn, that's a big sword. It's called Jayakuryu, and I haven't used it in combat for 7 years now, so this is quite an event for me. But seriously, Naruto said blankly, that's a really big sword, how do you even swing it? Zark's eyebrow twitched. As I was saying, few have ever seen its blade, let alone had the honor of facing it in combat. I mean. Naruto interrupted, it's just so big. Siri Kirite is a pretty good size, but that thing is just excessive. I see why you keep it sealed, because I sure wouldn't want to walk down the street carrying that thing. It's huge, like, Godzilla-sized, or maybe it's the Megazord sword from Power Rangers. Zark's patience snapped. Stop talking over me. Chapter 32, Interlude, The Dark Secret Meeting Room. Sasuke and Kabuto sat on the side of a hill, looking dejectedly at their surroundings. The medic Nin pushed his glasses up his nose, so even after all our hard work, we find ourselves unable to proceed. How vexing. We'll find the entrance soon, all it takes is a little patience. Maybe Itachi got the location wrong, it might be on the other side of the hill. It's worth a look, I guess. Pushing themselves up, the two made their way around mound of rock and dirt. Not a minute later, the ground where they had been sitting opened up, and Deidara walked tentatively into the sunlight. Damn, it's so bright out here. I'm going to kill Sasori for making me look for him. Mumbling curses, Deidara headed off towards the nearby village in search of the puppet user as the secret door closed silently, leaving no trace of its presence. Sasuke and Kabuto returned to their original spot even more discouraged, and Sasuke was fighting the urge to start throwing around some fire justice. There was no sign of anything on the other side, and I doubt Itachi would make a mistake like that anyway, but I still don't see a door here. Well, if we wait here, someone will have to use the door eventually, and we'll be here when they do. 30 seconds later. I'm bored. Shut up, Kabuto. Here's an idea. How about we just blow up the hill? Allow me to rephrase, shut up or I'll get you. I think Sasuke-sama needs to lighten up a bit. After all, Sasuke-sama, it can't be fun to be that uptight all the time. I like Sasuke-sama best when Sasuke-sama is optimistic and positive. Oh, for the love of. Don't start that again. Don't start what? Don't call me Sasuke-sama. Why, Sasuke-sa. Sasuke dove at him, and had just managed to get his hands around the scrawny medic Nin's neck when they heard a twig snap. Sasuke shoved Kabuto into a bush and dove in after him, putting them in a position that would have been awkward if they weren't so on edge. Deidara stomped up the hill, dragging Sasori behind her. We're an hour late for the fucking meeting. Where have you been all this time? The massive figure that was Sasori held a plastic bag filled with boxes. I was shopping, and the store was having a special today. The first 600 in line got a free special edition Goku. Dragon Ball Z action figures are not as important as top secret Akatsuki meetings. That's just your opinion. No, it's the way things are. In the bush, Kabuto and Sasuke watched the two Akatsuki pass by, then walk into the gaping hole that suddenly opened in the earth. As soon as the earth closed, they jumped up and ran to examine where there had just been an opening. Sasuke whistled softly, "The seam is perfect. Even my Sharingan can't tell there's a door here." Kabuto's leg hit something and he bent down to pick it up. "Hey. That guy dropped one of his figures." "Really?" Sasuke said semi-interestedly. "Which one?" "It's a special edition Goku figure." Sasuke's brain made the connection just as the earth opened up again. Oh crap. 5 sat in a dark room. One might question why the Akatsuki always felt the need to hold their secret meetings in dark rooms. After all, it wasn't like they didn't all know each other, and they were 50 feet underground, but the leader thought the dark made the secret meetings seem more secret. Unfortunately, 2 members had yet to appear, so right now they were just 5 people who were feeling rather silly sitting in a dark room. It was then that Deidara burst into the room. "We have a problem." Garm, head of the Akatsuki, looked up sharply. "Report." "I was returning with Sasori from the village and we saw these 2 guys feeling each other up in a bush but ignored them cause we wanted to get back, but once we got inside Sasori noticed that his special edition Goku figure was missing and he went back outside and saw the 2 guys with his figure and thought they stole it even though they really just found it on the ground, and it also turns out that they have Akatsuki cloaks. And weren't just 2 guys feeling each other up in a bush, because I'm pretty sure one of them is an Uchiha, but Sasori is trying to kill them while raving about people stealing his Goku action figures." The other 2 teams were looking at Deidara strangely, and Garm was fighting off an impending migraine. Once Sasori had been calmed down and his figure returned to him, Sasuke and Kabuto had to face the Akatsuki. The Uchiha scanned the room. "Why is it so dark in here?" Garm coughed into his hand. "That's not important. I have received word that the mission assigned to Kisame and Itachi was successful, but you must explain to me how you did it." "Well," Sasuke began, "I knew that there was no way we could get into the Mark's house without setting off any traps, so I had to modify a special genjutsu. Kabuto and I advanced into the grounds and the alarms went off, which we expected. We managed to evade the guards for quite a while, but when they did catch us, it was my turn to use my new jutsu." Flashback. A group of 4 guards cornered them in the hallway. "Stop." Sasuke looked on calmly and waved his hand. "Don't worry, we're not the intruders you're looking for." The guards' eyes glazed over and one turned to the others. "These aren't the intruders we're looking for." Sasuke waved his hand again. "You're beginning to suspect this alarm is just a diversion so the lady of the house can kill her husband." Another guard nodded sagely to his companions. "I'm beginning to suspect this alarm is just a diversion so the mistress can kill her husband." The hand was waved a 3rd time. "The rest of you agree?" The other 3 guards nodded. "We agree." One final wave of the hand. "You never saw us here." Sasuke and Kabuto ran down the hall and around the corner as the guards nodded in unison. "We never saw you here." The first guards blinked at his companions. What were we talking about, again? End flashback. After that, Sasuke continued, "It was just a matter of repeating the process a couple times, then finding the wife of the house and putting a genjutsu on her so she thought her husband was an evil space alien trying to suck out her brain. He dies, we escape, wife takes the blame. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bang." Garm stroked his chin in that way that only evil geniuses do. Not a bad mission result, and Itachi endorsed you, so I'll let you join for now. If you want to stay members, I expect a 100% mission success rate. We were going to have a meeting about how to replace the AWOL Team 1, but now we have replacements. Since Deidara and Sasori made us all wait for an hour to start a meeting which we now don't need to have, they get to be the lucky ones to show our newest members around the compound. Dismissed. Everyone filed out of the dark secret meeting room, and Sasuke and Kabuto, having no idea where to go, just waited for Deidara and Sasori to start their tour. The blonde just stomped past them, while Sasori hung back so as to follow them. And so their little procession made its way through the twisting halls until they reached a door. "This," Deidara said, kicking open the door, "is the cloakroom. Here we have all the Akatsuki cloaks you could ever want. You guys might want to change yours." Kabuto decided he just might do that, but Sasuke shook his head. "No thanks, I'll keep this one." Sasori looked down. "Strange. Your brother used to say the same thing. He was the only one of us who never changed his cloak." "Really? Him and I do have our similarities, I suppose." Deidara snapped on a new cloak. "Similarities? Listen, kid, if you were taller, ate Pocky all the time, and were a bit more of a jackass, I wouldn't be able to tell the 2 of you apart. Now let's move on to the next room." Sasori, being the closest to the door, led them down the hall to another door, which he slid open. Here we have the cool hat room, which has both regular hats and hats with little white dangly things, which make you look more mysterious, but also make it kind of hard to see. Kabuto looked like he was in heaven, and went straight for the white dangly thing hats, throwing one on. Being able to see is a small price to pay for looking this good. Deidara nodded. Finally, someone who understands the importance of cool hats. Sasori always says they're stupid. Ignoring the room of hats, Sasuke looked curiously up at the sand nin. That's a puppet, right? Yeah. So, to really make eye contact with you, I'd have to look at your chest or neck. I suppose. Doesn't it feel weird to have people always looking above your eye level when talking to you? In all Sasori's years of living inside a puppet, it had never bothered him. Until that moment. No, he said semi-convincingly. Sasuke just shrugged. Whatever you say. Their tour continued on for another hour, and the last thing they were shown was what would be their room. They had bunk beds. As the two older Akatsuki were just about to leave, Sasuke grabbed Sasori's arm and gestured for him to stay. Once Deidara was gone, the Uchiha closed the door and fought down his nervousness. Now I understand this may be a strange question, Sasori-san, but I need to ask. Your partner, Deidara. We've spent the last hour together, but I can't for the life of me tell if Deidara is a guy or a girl. Kabuto sighed. Even for a medic nin like me, I couldn't tell at all. Sasori made his way over to a large stool and sat down. What you have just asked is a question that has plagued me for years now. It doesn't matter which gender I use when referring to him, she never makes any effort to correct me. I've just gotten into the habit of switching genders with every pronoun. Deidara's gender is a mystery to everyone as far as I know. Garm might have figured it out, since he gives physical examinations to everyone when they join, but he's not telling anyone. Sasuke looked nervous. Physical examinations? Like testing for torture resistance and stuff? No, like a stick out your tongue and say "ah" kind of physical examination. He likes to know the bodies of his subordinates so he knows their weaknesses if they ever revolt. Still, how can you share a room with someone and not know what gender they are? Many would ask how Deidara can stand to room with a guy who lives in a puppet. Kabuto stretched out on his bed. Touché. Sasori rose and made his way to the door. You can try to spy on Deidara in the shower if you want, but no one has ever managed to see him naked. If you do try to peep on her though, remember to get some sleep. You'll work hard tomorrow. Sasuke climbed up onto his bunk. Thank you for the tour. The sand nin let out a laugh as he walked out the door. Welcome to the Akatsuki. I'll be interested to see if you once survive your first assigned mission. The door closed behind him and the Uchiha looked up at the ceiling with a smirk. You bet your big puppet ass we will. That's it for part 5. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.